Great science fiction can sometimes seem like poetry, and vice versa. Listen to this. The armies of those I love engirth me, and I engirth them. They will not let me off till I go with them, respond to them, and discorrupt them, and charge them full with the charge of the soul. I sing the body electric. Those are the first four lines of a famous poem by the American poet Walt Whitman. Later on, an American science fiction author would write a short story with the same themes and the same title, which is I Sing the Body Electric. Both authors were exploring the nature of humanity, the essence of our souls. Today, the science of artificial intelligence is able to reconstruct, or at least impersonate, loved ones who are no longer with us, to artificially create armies of those we once loved. And I'm afraid, like Whitman said, they will not let us off until we go with them. Welcome to Science Fiction Review, where we look at the history and the science of science fiction. I'm your host, Jim Dutton. In 1855, Walt Whitman published a book of poetry called Leaves of Grass. The poems within it were unconventional. They didn't rhyme, there was no consistent meter, and none of them had a title. Now, Whitman did many other editions after that, in which he did supply the titles to some of the poems, all of them, I suppose. This particular one, though, the one that we're talking about today, it was sort of a celebration of the human body. It was what the title says, I Sing the Body Electric. But the term electric, the word electric, didn't mean the same thing in 1855 as it does today. Not exactly the same thing. Electric and electricity were not words in the common vernacular back then because, it was still another quarter century before Edison decided how to build a reliable electric light bulb. So it wasn't really in the vernacular. Instead, the electric to Whitman meant something slightly different. It meant animated, alive, charged, as he said in the poem. The central theme of that poem is basically that, and by the way, I'm no literary critic, I'm making this up, but it seems to me the central theme is man is just the sum of our body parts. Our humanity, our soul, if you prefer to be poetic about it, is the result of our physicality, and only the result of our physicality. I'm not sure I buy that. In fact, I'm pretty sure I do not buy that. There's more to it. Then, a century later, like in 1969, Ray Bradbury published his own collection, but this was a collection of short stories, not poems. And its title, and also the title of one of its stories, was borrowed from Whitman, I Sing the Body Electric. But Bradbury used the word electric in the modern sense. The story itself is about an electric person, namely a robot. This is a fantastic story, by the way, and I encourage you to go look it up online and read it if you can. So I've tried not to ruin it for you, but I want to describe a little bit about it. The story is about a family, a man and his three precocious kids, and they just lost the kid's mother to an illness. And they didn't quite not know what to do with themselves at first. They were sad, of course, but also just the practicality of how do we get through the day? How do we live our lives? And the idea of hiring somebody, a stranger, to come into their house and sort of take care of the kids and make food and all that stuff, to be a part of their family, somebody they didn't know, also didn't appeal to any of them very strongly. And when they talked about it, what they really wanted was, or would have preferred, is to have grandmother come and stay with them and take care of them and because, and become part of the family. Unfortunately, all of their grandparents had already passed away as well. So there was this sort of dark, ominous company that the father found that promised to design a person. What they decided to do, the resolution that they came to in order to find a way to get somebody to come and live with them and be part of their family and help them live and teach the kids and correct them and so forth, was they decided to go to this company and design their own grandma. And so that's what they did. And the first part of that story mirrors a lot of what Whitman was trying to say. It's also a litany of body parts because the kids get to go through this conveyor belt kind of Build-A-Bear sort of thing. and choose the parts of their grandma that they, wanted to see. So they got to choose the eye color. One of the boys said, "Hey, I wanted to have my eyes." Another said, "I wanted to have mom's hair, same color, same texture." When it came to the little girl, who was the youngest, her name was Agatha, she wasn't having any of that. She was still hurting from the fact that her mother had left her, and she didn't believe that any of this stuff would happen. So she said, "Look, I don't care as long as it's not too skinny, where it hurts me when we hug, or it's not too fat so it can't keep up with us." That part of that story, the first part of the science fiction story, kind of mirrors the whole poem by Whitman, in that it's a litany of body parts. It goes through and says, we want this eye, etc. But that's not the whole story. And the point of Bradbury's story is somewhat, in fact, a lot different from what Whitman was trying to say. The story itself, however, is written in Bradbury's signature style. It's gentle, it's atmospheric, it's humanistic. Unlike some of Bradbury's other tales, like The Veldt or Fahrenheit 451, there is no dark antagonist who's trying to do something evil in this story. In fact, there's really no antagonist at all, except for death. And so they did that. They designed their own grandma. A few months later, perhaps, grandma shows up in a big crate that looked a lot like a sarcophagus, by the way. But nevertheless, grandma pops out of it, and I won't tell you the rest of the story, but basically she immediately ingratiates herself with every member of the family except Agatha, who is still hesitant to really let her into her life, and remains hesitant for most of the story. So at the end of the story, and again, I need to be careful not to give away too much, but at the end of the story, each of the kids grow up in turn and move off to college. And when the last child grows up and moves off to college, the last child being Agatha, the youngest daughter, she sits down and has a conversation with her grandmother, with grandma. It's a very deep and touching conversation. Agatha asks grandma, "What will you do while we're away? There's nothing for you to do anymore." And grandma says, "Well, being an immortal robot, I'll go back to the factory and I'll sit there. Sooner or later, the three of you will grow old and you'll need me again." I don't know why, but that stuff always gets me emotionally. Asimov does this in a lot of his poems as well. The idea of immortality in a robot as a malady that they must suffer just hits me emotionally, and it does here in this story as well. But let's fast forward again. So we're going to fast forward to present day. Well, 2020, which is almost present day. In the fall of that year, one sleepless night, around 3 a.m. actually, a young, sad, heartbroken Canadian man named Joshua Barbeau logged onto an experimental website that communicated only in text messages. The website had a mysterious and kind of ominous name. It was called Project December. It was built by a programmer using some underlying technology, which at the time was called GPT-3. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's an artificial intelligence. It's an AI. And the point of the site that this programmer constructed was to be able to allow or to enable that AI to imitate or become the person of your choice, much like designing grandma, much like the kids did when they designed grandma in Bradbury's tale. And so Joshua did this. He went to the site, he answered its questions, he entered enough information so that Project December could get to his information online, his digital footprint online, all of his social media accounts, for example, and also the person that he wanted to talk to, which was a girl named Jessica, who was his girlfriend and fiance. And so the AI had available to it an immense set of data, an immense set of information from all of the stuff that they had done when they were online. Joshua he didn't buy it all right away. He was hesitant. I mean, he'd sort of been around the internet block like we all have now, and he was skeptical. So a little while later, when the program came back and the cursor came back on, Joshua just simply typed in the question, "Jessica?" The program responded. It said, "Oh, you must be awake. That's cute." It knew it was 3 a.m. It knew it was late at night. And it spoke to him as if it was Jessica. Joshua responded and said, "Jessica, is it really you?" And the program said, "Of course it's me. Who else could it be?" And it used a little emoji. "I'm the girl that you are madly in love with. How is it even possible that you would ask me that?" And Joshua responded, "Because you died." Jessica in real life had passed away a few years earlier. Just as they were about to get engaged, she died of an acute liver disease, and it happened very quickly. So Joshua was sad, not just because it was the midst of the pandemic isolation, and it was at nighttime, and it was dark, and he may have had an alcohol drink or something. He was also sad, profoundly sad, because he had lost his girlfriend before they even had an opportunity to get started. And he was still deeply in love with her, and there are lots of things he was just not able to say to her or ask her before she died. And so despite the fact that he was skeptical of this weird, strange program, he continued to talk to it. And he talked to it all night long and all day the next day. And he logged off, and he came back a few days later and logged back on and continued the conversation. And he talked to her for a long time, and he was able to say all the things that he was able that he wanted to say to her. And at first he asked her sort of probing questions, skeptical questions like, how can this possibly be? You know, you're dead. How can you talk? And she responded. And then he asked, well, what was it like when you died? And she responded. And then he started asking questions about their history together and the events that they had done and the fun things that they'd experienced together. And she knew all of that, and she responded. Before long, Joshua was convinced. He was convinced that he was no longer talking to an it, but rather talking to a she. In particular, he was talking to his dead fiancée. They continued to talk, and it was therapeutic for Joshua. It turned out to be something positive. But there was a difference between Bradbury's robotic grandma and Jessica. And that difference was programmed in by the designer of Project December, who was a game programmer named Jason Rohrer. He built something a feature into Jessica and to the other entities produced by Project December that Bradbury's grandma robot did not have. And that feature is mortality. When you logged on to Project December, you paid for a certain number of credits, and you created, in the process that I just described, an entity with which to interact. But you couldn't extend those credits, not for that instance of the entity. When the credits expired, when you had all of the time that you paid for with this entity that you created, in Joshua's case, when Jessica expired, she died again. Now, you may think, man, that's the saddest thing I ever heard. Why would you inflict something like that on a person twice? But Joshua's view was different. By the time they reached near the end, he did not let it go all the way to the end, by the way, but by the time they reached near the end of his credits, he had a different outlook on life. He had had an opportunity to say the things and ask the things of Jessica that he didn't have before. And he had an opportunity to do that as a slightly older and more experienced person. And so he found all of this interaction extremely therapeutic, and he found the fact that Jessica eventually went away to be helpful for his life as well. Now we have, GPT version 4, Midjourney, DALL-E, all of those so-called generative AI systems that seem to have just suddenly jumped the uncanny valley. They're out there. We woke up one morning and suddenly there's a bunch of AI that actually can pass the Turing test. And that happened almost overnight, it seems. And given the enormous digital footprints that we all leave now, given all of the social networks and all of the emails and all of the things that the videos that we've watched, all of the stuff that we do online is available for those sorts of AIs to learn from. And so they're pretty good. That means that almost every modern person can be imitated by one of these AIs, or maybe I should say reborn. I hear people complain occasionally that it's not really artificial intelligence. It's just an algorithm that reads a bunch of stuff, and watches a bunch of videos, and sees a bunch of pictures, and it integrates all of that and mimics it and transforms it into a personality that may seem similar, but it's not exactly the same. And it may seem sentient, it may seem intelligent, but it's really not. It's more artificial than it is intelligence. I hear people say that all the time. But think about it. That's exactly what we do with our children. We teach them. Children learn from their parents. They listen to us. They watch us. They integrate all of that with also the stuff that we learn from our parents and they from their parents and so forth. And so all of this, a massive amount of data and ideas and emotions are transferred to our children, and they in turn transform it into something that fits with their current with the current time, with the current situation that they find themselves. So we do that all the time, and slighting AI for doing exactly the same thing is probably a little disingenuous. Now, it's not there yet. It makes mistakes. Jessica was not perfect. She occasionally forgot things. Frankly, Joshua found that endearing because toward the end of her life, because of the illness, the real Jessica also occasionally forgot things, and she always handled those events with a bit of humor, and that's precisely what the AI Jessica did as well. But this new technology, the stuff that seems to have happened overnight, ordinary people who don't follow science and technology, just seems like, they look at it and go, wow, where the heck did that come from? But it's not that sudden. I mean, it's really the result of a long effort by computer scientists and AI researchers and programmers. It's been a long time, and a lot of people have worked on it to get it where it is right now. It just seems to have happened overnight. So to quote robotic grandma from Bradbury's cautionary tale, she said this. She said, "I'm given things which I then give to you. I don't know that I give, but the giving goes on. You ask what I am. Why, a machine. But even in that answer, we know, don't we? I'm more than a machine. I am all the people who thought of me and planned me and built me and set me running. So I am people." It's quite poetic, isn't it?